Who wants to talk about giant ants?
Yes, so Avengers Age of Ultron. While Japan was dealing with the aftermath of having nuclear bombs dropped on them, even before the full onset of the Cold War and the shadow of mutually assured destruction, there was a concern in America about the responsibility of having opening the atomic edition of Pandora's box as well. Thus, Them, also released in 1954, where James Whitmore's New Mexico Police Sergeant Ben Peterson is tasked with figuring out what's causing a trail of destruction and death out in the desert, including a holidaying FBI man. This brings James Arness's Special Agent Robert Graham on board, and before long, for reasons unclear to the detectives, but as transparent to an audience that's seen the poster, myrmecologist Edmund Glenn's Dr. Harold Medford and his daughter, Joan Weldon's Dr. Pat Medford. At the risk of shortcutting this a bit too radically, they work out that the trouble is being caused by ants of unusual size, which brings with it unusual strength and ferocity. Thanks, Oppenheimer. Now you have become Death, maker of large ants. The authorities work quickly to eradicate this threat, but discover that 2 new queens have already flown the nest, and so begins a race against time to track down and destroy them before humanity is supplanted as the dominant species, ending, as things so often do, in a Los Angeles storm drain. This was a massive success for Warner Bros. On release, and I want to say up front that I did quite enjoy watching this, but it is hard to check the decades-long accumulation of creature feature genre baggage at the door and take this entirely at face value. I mean, it's only a couple of decades later than this, and its genre mates have been parodied out of existence by the likes of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and replaced in cinemas by disaster films, which is ironic as most disaster films follow fairly similar action and pacing pathways as these films, just replacing the giant ants or whatever with fire or water or just bees of a normal size.
Or mutating neutrinos.
Yes. Anyway, a lot of Them is not about taking a flamethrower to a delightfully chintzy toy ant, and is instead something more akin to a criminal manhunt headed by David Attenborough. And you know what? I'm here for it. It's refreshing to see this played entirely straight, and with the obvious exception of the Oscar-nominated special effects and scientific understanding of radiation and DNA, it doesn't feel all that dated. Well, okay, it does, but not in a bad way, and it even avoids later developed tropes such as the needlessly obstructive superior officer not allowing something just to inject a bit of human drama into the film. Is it essential viewing in space year 2021? While the continued endurance of Godzilla makes viewing the original worthwhile historical exercise, the Western arm of creature features has long been dead, except in King Kong, of course. Still, it's nice to see what, arguably, launched 1,000 imitators and popularised and normalised the subgenre so much that it eventually burned out. It's an easy, breezy watch that doesn't outstay its welcome, so go for it. Why not?
Yeah, I was actually really looking forward to this, particularly because I remember loving playing A Game from the Desert, Cinemaware game on my Amiga back in the day, which I was terrible at. I could never consistently shoot the ant's antennae often enough and just died. Well, the film did have an attractive nurse. The game did have an attractive nurse, and that was an important thing at the time. But
it was all we needed back then. We made our own entertainment.
Yeah. But I was looking forward to it for that, and actually, simply as a piece of entertainment, I enjoyed this more than Godzilla. However, Godzilla clearly has things to say. Well, it's not that this film has nothing to say, but it's a bit more obvious. It's a bit like, all this radiation, we don't really know what it could do. We should probably be careful. I was like, Godzilla's got a lot more underpinning its ideas, but for all that, it's entertaining, and I do like the fact that it's kind of like more like an investigation, and like, well, a lot of the science, and it's not going to stand up to rigour. They did try to like put something in there. It's at least kind of have this, at least had as much kind of truthiness to how it sounds as anything you'd get in Star Trek.
Yeah.
You know, it's the right kind of words and the tone, and like it wasn't just, you know, some sort of Roland Emmerich nonsense. Actually, I'm honestly quite surprised it didn't have the mutated neutrinos be caused by nuclear explosions or something, because I would have actually tied it into quite nicely to this and the other films. Yeah, I think the problem is that genre, as with Godzilla 2, is like, it very quickly got into campy silliness.
Yeah.
Whereas this is earnest, but you're very entertaining for it. I certainly, having been unfamiliar with this now, I'm thinking, I have to bring up James Cameron again, actually. Like, I'm thinking a certain character in one of his films may have had an analogue in here, because the ants, they mostly come at night, mostly.
Right, okay. What species are you guys, man? Because 20 minutes into this film, I was experimenting with different glues that I have in the kitchen drawer to try and keep my eyelids open, man. This is a film in which the action consists of people shooting bazookas at sand. And, like, no, genuinely, I mean, obviously, again, okay, yep, the use of the atomic weapons, okay, Japan really were desperately seeking some sort of reconciliation between their experience and their future. The Americans, in terms of how seriously they were taking the responsibility having wielded those weapons, not so much. Like, I was convinced I had seen this film before, and it turns out that actually I'd only seen about 3 minutes of this film, and the rest I was conflating with. It came from the desert, because like you, Drew, I was incredibly bad at that game. Although I remember it so vividly that even now I can still remember the musical loop for O'Riordan's pub or bar or whatever it was, at diner, I think, in that game. It sometimes crops into my head and I can't get rid of it. It becomes an earworm for like a week. So it turns out that I hadn't seen a lot of this film, and I feel like I would have been a lot better off if I hadn't. I don't think there's a great deal of merit in this at all, and it suffers from that fantastical problem, although I say a problem, but I think there's a lot of films nowadays that would benefit from this, of as they're making their way into the nest towards the end of the film, you look at the timer and you go, this film's got 2 minutes left. What's happening here? And films of this period just really didn't know how to pace their resolution all that much. And so what you get here is some people stumbling into a nest and the professor going, yes, we can be sure that's all of them, kill them. Well, that was a thing that happened, wasn't it? We can never be sure what's going to happen in the future with nuclear weapons. Never mind, everything's okay now. Din, 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 din. The end. What? Come again? Yeah, just a really weird experience for me, and I didn't enjoy it at all, contrary to you fellas. I know what you're saying about, I know you're not making a case for it as great art, but I just don't think there's anything to enjoy about this film at all, and I'm slightly baffled by your viewpoint, but it's okay.
It's no Avengers Age of Ultron, but...
No. It's no Aaron Taylor-Johnson flick.
That's the film that had Aaron Taylor-Johnson and James Spader in it. I'm like, I think explain why it was so bad.
Can I point out, though, that these ants do have an impressive pincer movement?
I think we need to end it there.
Shall we?
I can't go on from that, really.
It's only going to go downhill from here.
This is the logical end of everything, really. It's been nice knowing you. We won't be back. This is it. It's all gone.